Hey there! So, have you ever been sitting with friends or colleagues, maybe at lunch or during a coffee break, and someone asks you, "What's your favorite travel experience?" And you freeze. You know exactly what you want to say in your own language, but in English, your mind just goes blank. You want to share that amazing trip, that incredible moment, but the words just won't come out the way you want them to. Has that happened to you? Because honestly, it's happened to me so many times, and I know it happens to so many English learners out there. Welcome to English Club Podcast. I'm Emily, and I'm so happy you're here with me today. You know, I was actually thinking about this topic this morning while I was making my coffee. I was scrolling through some old photos on my phone, just randomly looking at pictures from different trips I've taken, and I realized something. I have all these incredible memories, these beautiful experiences, but when I tried to describe them out loud, even to myself, I wanted to make sure I was using the right words, the most natural expressions. And that got me thinking about you, about all of you listening right now who want to share your travel stories in English. I mean, travel experiences are such a big part of our lives, right? They shape who we are. They give us stories to tell. They connect us with other people. And being able to talk about them in English, well, that's not just about language practice. It's about sharing a part of yourself, your adventures, your growth, your joy with others. So today we're going to talk about how to describe your favorite travel experience in English. And I'm not just talking about saying, "I went to Paris, it was nice." No. We're going to go deeper than that. We're going to learn how to really paint a picture with your words, how to make people feel like they were there with you, how to express your emotions and your memories in a way that feels natural and authentic. Why does this matter? Well, think about it. When you meet new people, travel stories are one of the most common conversation topics. At work, during small talk, at social events, in job interviews even, people ask about travel. It's a safe topic, it's interesting, and it's a great way to connect with others. Plus, talking about travel gives you a chance to practice so many different areas of English at once. You're using past tenses, you're describing places and people, you're expressing feelings, you're telling a story. It's like a complete English workout all in one conversation. And by the end of this episode, you're going to know how to start your travel story in an engaging way, describe places and experiences with vivid details, express your emotions and feelings naturally, use the right past tenses confidently, and keep your listener interested from beginning to end. You're also going to learn tons of useful vocabulary and phrases that native speakers actually use when they talk about travel. But before we dive in, if you're enjoying this podcast, please like and subscribe to our channel for more English learning podcasts. It really helps us create more content for you. Okay, are you ready? Let's do this. So let's start with the basics, okay? When someone asks you about your favorite travel experience, where do you even begin? I remember when I first started teaching English, I would ask my students this question. And you know what? Most of them would say something like, "I went to Thailand, it was good." And then they'd stop. And I'd be sitting there thinking, okay, but tell me more. What happened in Thailand? What did you see? What did you feel? The thing is, we need to learn how to open our travel stories in a way that grabs attention. So here's what I usually do, and what I recommend to all my students. Start with the feeling or the moment, not the place. Instead of saying, "My favorite travel experience was when I went to Japan," try something like this. "The moment I stepped off the train and saw Mount Fuji for the first time, I couldn't believe it was real. That was during my trip to Japan, and it completely changed how I see the world." You see the difference? The second one immediately pulls the listener in. They want to know more. They can picture that moment. So when you're thinking about your favorite travel experience, ask yourself, what was the one moment that really stuck with you? What was the feeling you remember most? That's where you start. Let me tell you about my favorite travel experience, and I'll show you how I would describe it naturally. So a few years ago, I went to Iceland. Now, I could just say, "I went to Iceland and it was beautiful," but that doesn't really tell you anything, right? So instead, let me tell you the real story. It was actually in September. I think it was early September, and I had been feeling really stressed with work. You know that feeling when you just need to get away, when you need a complete change of scenery? That was me. I was exhausted, burned out, and I needed something different. So I booked a trip to Iceland kind of last minute. I didn't have a big plan. I didn't have a detailed itinerary. I just knew I needed to go somewhere that felt completely unlike my normal life. And let me tell you, from the moment I arrived at the airport in Reykjavik, everything felt different. The air was different, you know? It was so clean and fresh and cold. And the landscape, oh my goodness, the landscape was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was almost like being on another planet. Everywhere I looked, there were these volcanic rocks, these moss-covered hills, and in the distance, you could see mountains and glaciers. Now, notice how I'm telling you this story. I'm not listing facts. I'm not saying, first I did this, then I did that. I'm painting a picture. I'm sharing feelings. I'm making you feel like you're there with me. That's what makes a travel story interesting in any language, but especially in English. So one of the most important things when you're describing your travel experience is using the right vocabulary to describe places. And I don't mean complicated words. I mean words that are specific and visual. Instead of saying nice view, you might say breathtaking view or stunning panorama. Instead of big mountains, you could say towering peaks or majestic mountains. Let me give you some really useful adjectives for describing places. These are words that native speakers use all the time, and they're perfect for B1 level learners. Are you ready? Take a mental note of these, or actually, if you can, maybe write them down. For describing beautiful places, you can use stunning, breathtaking, magnificent, spectacular, picturesque, charming, peaceful, serene, unspoiled, pristine. Each of these words has a slightly different feeling, right? Stunning is like, wow, it hits you immediately. Serene is more about feeling calm and peaceful. Pristine means clean and untouched by humans. For describing the atmosphere or feeling of a place, you can use lively, vibrant, bustling, quiet, tranquil, romantic, mysterious, exotic, authentic, touristy. Now, touristy is interesting because it can be negative, right? When we say a place is touristy, we usually mean there are too many tourists and it's lost some of its authentic character. Let me go back to my Iceland story and show you how these words work in context. So after I arrived in Reykjavik, I rented a car and started driving along the coast. The coastal roads were absolutely spectacular. On one side, I had the ocean, these dramatic cliffs dropping down to the water. And on the other side, there were these pristine waterfalls. I mean, Iceland has so many waterfalls, and each one is more stunning than the last. I stopped at this one waterfall called Seljalandisfoss.
Now, I know that's a hard name to say, but this waterfall, oh my goodness, you can actually walk behind it. Can you imagine that? You walk on this path that takes you behind the falling water, and you're standing there looking out at the world through this curtain of water, and it's just breathtaking. I stood there for probably 20 minutes just watching the water, feeling the mist on my face, listening to the sound. It was one of those moments where you feel so small but also so alive, you know? And this is another important point about describing travel experiences. Don't just describe what you saw, describe what you heard, what you smelled, what you felt, physically and emotionally. When you include all these senses in your story, it becomes so much more vivid and interesting. So I could say, the waterfall was beautiful. Okay, fine, but that's boring. Instead, I say, the sound of the water was deafening but somehow peaceful at the same time. I could feel the cold mist on my face and hands. My clothes got completely soaked, but I didn't care. I just stood there, breathing in that fresh air, feeling more present and alive than I had in months. Do you see how that brings the experience to life? That's what we want to do with our travel stories. Now, let's talk about grammar for a minute, because I know some of you might be worried about using the right tenses. When you're talking about a past travel experience, you're mainly going to use the past simple tense. That's your main tool. I went to Iceland, I saw waterfalls, I felt amazed. But you're also going to use past continuous for background information or to describe what was happening at a specific moment. For example, I was driving along the coast when I saw the most incredible sunset. Or while I was walking behind the waterfall, I was thinking about how lucky I was to be there. The past continuous helps you add depth to your story. It helps you set the scene. You might also use past perfect for things that happened before the main events of your story. Like, I had always wanted to visit Iceland, so when I finally got the chance, I was so excited. Or, I had seen pictures of the Northern Lights, but seeing them in person was completely different. But here's the thing, and this is really important. Don't stress too much about perfect grammar when you're telling your story. Yes, grammar matters, but communication matters more. If you make a small grammar mistake, but your story is engaging and clear, people will understand you and they'll be interested. The goal is to communicate, to share your experience, not to be perfect. Let me continue with my Iceland story because I want to show you how to structure a longer narrative. So after the waterfalls, I continued driving and I decided to visit some hot springs. Now, Iceland is famous for its geothermal hot springs, and I had read about this one place that was less touristy, more authentic. It was called the Secret Lagoon. I arrived there in the late afternoon, and it was starting to get dark. The temperature was dropping. It was probably around 5 degrees Celsius, which is pretty cold. And I was thinking, am I really going to get into a hot spring in this weather? But I did, and oh my goodness, it was incredible. Picture this. I'm sitting in this naturally heated pool, the water is about 38 degrees, and all around me is steam rising into the cold air. Other people are there too, but it's quiet. Everyone is just relaxing, enjoying the moment. Above us, the sky is getting darker and darker, and then suddenly someone points up and says, "Look!" And there they were, the northern lights, the aurora borealis. I had hoped to see them during my trip, but I hadn't really expected it, you know? And there I was, sitting in a hot spring in Iceland, watching green lights dance across the sky. It was magical. It was surreal. It was one of those moments you know you'll never forget. Now, when you're describing a moment like this, a peak moment in your travel experience, you want to slow down your story. You want to give details. You want to let your listener really feel that moment with you. So I don't just say, "I saw the northern lights." I describe the whole scene, where I was, what I was doing, who was around me, how I felt, what it looked like. Speaking of feelings, let's talk about expressing emotions in English, because this is such an important part of sharing travel experiences. When something amazing happens during your trip, how do you express that in English? Here are some really useful phrases. You can say, "I was overwhelmed with emotion. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was speechless. My heart was pounding. I felt tears in my eyes. I was filled with joy. I felt so grateful. I was in complete awe. It took my breath away. I'll never forget that moment." These phrases are natural, they're common, and they really help you express strong emotions without sounding too dramatic or unnatural. Let me use some of them in context with my Iceland story. When I saw the northern lights dancing across the sky, I was in complete awe. I mean, I had seen pictures and videos, but being there, seeing it with my own eyes, it took my breath away. I felt tears in my eyes, not because I was sad, but because I was so overwhelmed with emotion. It was just so beautiful, so powerful. I couldn't believe this was really happening to me. You see, those phrases help me express the intensity of the emotion without just saying I was happy or it was nice. They give depth to the feeling. Now, I want to talk about something that a lot of English learners struggle with, and that's keeping their story interesting throughout. Because here's the thing, right? You start your story with energy and enthusiasm, but then you get nervous or you run out of vocabulary, and suddenly your story becomes flat. You start saying, "And then I did this, and then I did that, and then I went there," and it becomes a bit boring. So how do you keep your story engaging from beginning to end? Well, here are some tips that I always share with my students, and they really work. First, vary your sentence structure. Don't start every sentence with "I." Mix it up. Sometimes start with a time expression. "The next morning, I woke up early." Sometimes start with a place. "In the small town of Vik, I found the best bakery." Sometimes start with a feeling. "Exhausted but happy, I finally reached my hotel." Second, use transition words and phrases. These help your story flow naturally. You can use "after that," "later that day," "the next morning," "meanwhile," "suddenly," "eventually," "by the time," "as soon as," "while," "before long," "in the end," "finally." These little words make such a big difference in how smooth and natural your story sounds. Third, include dialogue or conversations when relevant. If something interesting happened with another person, don't just report it, show it. For example, instead of saying, "I talked to a local person and they gave me advice," you could say, "I was looking at my map, completely lost, when a local woman came up to me and said, 'Are you okay? Can I help you?' I was so relieved. I told her I was trying to find this restaurant, and she smiled and said, 'Oh, I know that place. Come, I'll show you the way.' We ended up walking together for 10 minutes, and she told me all about the town." Do you see how that's more interesting? It brings the story to life. It makes the listener feel like they're there with you. Fourth, and this is really important, include challenges or unexpected moments. The best travel stories aren't just about everything being perfect. They're about the surprises, the difficulties, the things that didn't go according to plan, because those are the moments that make travel real and memorable. Let me tell you about something that happened during my Iceland trip.
So, I had planned to visit this famous black sand beach called Reynisfjara. I had seen so many photos of it, and I was really excited. But when I got there, the weather was terrible. I mean, it was raining, the wind was so strong I could barely walk, and I was thinking, should I even get out of the car? But I did. I put on my rain jacket and I walked down to the beach. And you know what? It was even more dramatic and beautiful because of the weather. The waves were huge and powerful, crashing against these black rocks. The wind was making the rain fall horizontally. I could taste salt on my lips. And I felt so small, so insignificant compared to the power of nature. Now, I could have just said the weather was bad, but the beach was still nice.
But instead, I'm describing the experience in detail. I'm showing you why the bad weather actually made the experience better, more memorable. And that's what makes a good story. Another thing about describing travel experiences is talking about the people you met. Travel isn't just about places, it's about people too. And sharing stories about the people you encountered can make your travel story so much richer and more interesting. During my time in Iceland, I met this guy at my hotel. He was from Germany, and we started chatting at breakfast. He was traveling alone too, and we decided to explore Reykjavik together for the day. We had such a great time. We went to this amazing fish restaurant, we visited some art galleries, we walked around the city and just talked about life, about travel, about our dreams and experiences. And what I realized that day is that some of the best parts of travel are these unexpected connections with other travelers. You meet someone you would never have met in your normal life, you spend a few hours or a few days together, and then you go your separate ways, but you always remember them. So when you're describing your favorite travel experience, don't forget to mention the people. Who did you meet? Who did you travel with? Did you make any friends? Did any locals help you? Did you have any interesting interactions? These human moments often become the most meaningful parts of our travel memories. Now, let's talk about describing food, because food is such a huge part of travel, right? Every culture has its own cuisine, its own flavors, and trying new food is one of the most exciting parts of visiting a new place. In Iceland, I tried so many interesting things. I tried fermented shark, which I have to be honest, was not delicious. It was really strong and kind of smelly, but I tried it because I wanted the authentic experience, you know? I also tried fresh Icelandic lamb, which was incredible. It was so tender and flavorful. And I had this amazing fish soup that was creamy and warming and perfect for the cold weather. When you're describing food in English, you want to use descriptive adjectives. Here are some useful ones: delicious, tasty, flavorful, bland, spicy, mild, sweet, savory, sour, bitter, creamy, crunchy, tender, tough, fresh, authentic, exotic. And you can describe your reaction to the food. It was the best meal I've ever had. I couldn't stop eating it. It wasn't to my taste. It was interesting, but I wouldn't order it again. I was surprised by how much I liked it. It looked strange, but it tasted amazing. Food stories are great for adding color and personality to your travel narrative. They show that you really engaged with the culture, that you were adventurous, that you were open to new experiences. Let me give you another example of how to describe a complete travel experience, but this time with a different type of trip. Imagine you went to a city, maybe Rome or Bangkok or New York. How would you describe that? Well, you'd focus on different elements, right? In a city, you might talk about the architecture, the streets, the neighborhoods, the energy of the place. You might say, the streets were narrow and winding, lined with old buildings in shades of yellow and orange. Every corner I turned revealed something new: a hidden piazza, a small cafe, a beautiful church. The city had this incredible energy, everyone moving with purpose, talking loudly, laughing. I loved getting lost in the streets, just wandering without a map, discovering places by chance. Or you might focus on cultural experiences. I visited so many museums and galleries. Each one was packed with incredible art and history. I spent an entire day in the Vatican museums, completely amazed by the sculptures and paintings. The Sistine Chapel, oh my goodness, seeing Michelangelo's work in person was absolutely breathtaking. I stood there for so long, my neck was hurting from looking up, but I couldn't look away. The key is to choose the details that made the biggest impression on you, the moments that really defined your experience. You can't describe everything that happened during your trip. That would take hours and it would be boring. Instead, you choose 2 or 3 key moments or experiences and you really dive deep into those. Now, I want to address something that I hear from my students all the time. They say, Emily, I don't have a favorite travel experience. I haven't traveled much, or my travel experiences aren't interesting enough. And I always tell them the same thing. Every experience is worth sharing if you share it well. Maybe you didn't go to Iceland or Paris or Japan. Maybe you just went to a city in your own country. Maybe you took a weekend trip to a beach that's only 2 hours away. That's okay. What matters is how you tell the story, what you learned, what you felt, what you discovered. I remember one of my students told me about a trip she took to a small village in her country. She wasn't sure if it was interesting enough to share, but when she told me the story, it was beautiful. She talked about visiting her grandmother's childhood home, walking through the fields where her grandmother used to play, meeting distant relatives she had never met before.
She talked about sitting around a table with these relatives, eating traditional food, hearing old family stories. And by the end of her story, I felt emotional. It was such a personal, meaningful experience, even though she never left her country. So don't think your travel experience has to be exotic or far away to be worth sharing. What makes a travel story interesting is the emotions, the details, the humanity, not necessarily the location. Another common question I get is, how long should my travel story be? And the answer is, it depends on the situation. If someone casually asks you about your favorite travel experience at a party or during small talk, you probably want to keep it to 2 or 3 minutes. Give them the highlights, the most interesting parts. And if they seem interested, they'll ask questions and you can give more details. But if you're in a more relaxed setting, maybe sitting with friends over dinner, or if someone specifically asks you to tell them more, then you can take your time. You can really get into the details, share multiple stories from the same trip, go deeper into the emotions and experiences. The key is to read your audience, to pay attention to their body language and their level of interest. Are they asking questions? Are they engaged? Then keep going, give them more. Are they looking distracted or checking their phone? Then maybe wrap it up, give them a nice conclusion. Speaking of conclusions, let's talk about how to end your travel story in a satisfying way. You don't want to just stop talking abruptly. You want to give your listener some closure, some final thought or reflection. Here are some good ways to end a travel story. You can reflect on what you learned. That trip taught me so much about myself.
I learned that I'm braver than I thought, that I can handle unexpected challenges, and that the best experiences often come from stepping outside my comfort zone. You can express how the trip changed you. I came back from that trip as a different person. I felt more confident, more open-minded, more appreciative of different cultures and ways of life. You can express gratitude. I feel so grateful that I had the opportunity to experience that. It's something I'll treasure for the rest of my life. You can make a connection to the present. Ever since that trip, I try to maintain that sense of adventure in my daily life. I remind myself to be curious, to be open to new experiences, to say yes to opportunities. Or you can simply express the lasting impact. It was years ago, but I still think about that trip all the time. Those memories still make me smile. Let me finish my Iceland story with a proper ending. So after a week in Iceland, it was time to leave. My last day there, I drove back to Reykjavik early in the morning. The sun was just rising, and the whole landscape was bathed in this golden light. I pulled over at a viewpoint and just sat there for a while, taking it all in. The mountains, the glaciers, the vast empty spaces. I thought about how stressed and burned out I had felt before this trip, and I realized that somewhere between the waterfalls and the hot springs, between the northern lights and the black sand beaches, I had found myself again. I had remembered what it felt like to be present, to be amazed by the world, to feel small and insignificant in the best possible way. That trip to Iceland will always be my favorite travel experience, not just because the country is stunningly beautiful, which it is, but because it reminded me of why I love to travel. Travel takes us out of our routines, out of our comfort zones. It shows us new perspectives. It challenges us. It heals us. And it gives us stories to tell, memories to cherish, and experiences that shape who we are. Now, I've been talking for a while, and I've given you a lot of information. So let me just recap some of the key points about describing your favorite travel experience in English. First, start with a strong hook, a moment or a feeling that grabs attention. Don't just state the place. Pull your listener into the experience. Second, use descriptive vocabulary. Use adjectives that paint a picture. Stunning, breathtaking, serene, vibrant. Use sensory details, what you saw, heard, smelled, felt. Make your listener feel like they're there with you. Third, use the past tenses correctly, but don't stress too much about perfection. Your main tense will be past simple, with some past continuous and past perfect mixed in. But focus on communication first, grammar second. Fourth, express your emotions authentically. Use phrases like, I was overwhelmed. It took like breath away. I couldn't believe my eyes. Let your listener feel what you felt. Fifth, keep your story engaging by varying your sentence structure, using transition words, including dialogue, and mentioning the unexpected moments or challenges, not just the perfect parts. Sixth, include details about people you met and food you tried. These human and cultural elements make your story richer and more memorable. Seventh, remember that any travel experience can be interesting if you tell it well. The location doesn't have to be exotic. What matters is the emotion, the details, the personal significance.
And finally, end your story with a reflection or a conclusion. Give your listener a sense of closure and show them why this experience was meaningful to you. One more thing I want to mention before we finish. A lot of English learners feel nervous about telling stories because they're worried about making mistakes or not finding the right words. And I totally understand that fear. I really do. But here's what I've learned from years of teaching and from my own experience learning other languages. People love hearing about travel experiences, and they're usually very patient and supportive listeners. When you're sharing something personal and meaningful, when you're opening up about your experiences and your feelings, people connect with that. They're not sitting there judging your grammar or counting your mistakes. They're interested in your story. They want to know what happened, how you felt, what you discovered. So my advice to you is this. Practice telling your favorite travel story. Tell it to yourself first, maybe while you're walking or cooking or before you go to sleep. Get comfortable with the flow of the story, with the key moments you want to share. Then when you have the chance, tell it to someone. Maybe start with a friend who's also learning English, someone who will be supportive and understanding. And then gradually tell it to more people in different situations. Each time you tell your story, you'll get better at it. You'll find better words, smoother transitions, more natural expressions, and you'll gain confidence. And that confidence will carry over into other areas of your English speaking. Also, I want to encourage you to ask other people about their travel experiences too. When you're having a conversation in English and you're not sure what to talk about, asking about travel is always a great option. You can say, "Have you traveled anywhere interesting recently?" Or, "What's your favorite place you've ever visited?" Or, "If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go?" And then when they share their story, listen actively. Ask follow-up questions, show interest. This is how you learn natural English, by listening to how other people tell their stories, what expressions they use, how they structure their narratives. Plus, it's just a wonderful way to connect with people. Travel stories are personal. They reveal something about who we are, what we value, what excites us. When someone shares their favorite travel experience with you, they're sharing a piece of themselves. I also want to remind you that it's okay to admit when you don't know a word. If you're in the middle of telling your travel story and you can't think of the English word for something, you can say, "I don't know the exact word in English, but it's like," and then describe it. Or you can ask, "How do you say?" Native speakers do this too sometimes, by the way. We all occasionally struggle to find the right word. The important thing is to keep going, to not let a missing word derail your entire story. You can describe things, you can gesture, you can use simpler words. Communication is about getting your meaning across, not about using perfect vocabulary every single time. And here's something interesting. Sometimes when you're telling a story and you can't find a word, the other person will help you. They'll suggest the word you're looking for, and then you learn it in context, which is the best way to learn new vocabulary. So don't be afraid of those moments. They're learning opportunities. I remember when I was learning Spanish, I was trying to tell someone about a trip I took to the mountains, and you couldn't remember the word for hike. I kept saying, "I walked up the mountain," but I knew there was a better word. Finally, the person I was talking to said, "Oh, you went hiking." And I was like, "Yes, exactly." And I never forgot that word again because I needed it in a real conversation. So embrace those learning moments. They're part of the process, and they actually help you learn faster and more effectively than just memorizing word lists. Now, before we wrap up, I want to give you a little challenge. After you finish listening to this podcast, I want you to think about your favorite travel experience. It doesn't have to be a long trip or an exotic destination.
Just think about a travel experience that was meaningful to you, that left an impression that you remember fondly. Then I want you to practice describing it out loud. You can do this alone, just talking to yourself, or you can record yourself on your phone. Tell your story as if you're talking to a friend. Include the details we talked about: the setting, the emotions, the sensory experiences, the people, the challenges, the conclusion. Don't worry about being perfect. Just practice expressing yourself, finding the words, letting the story flow. And if you want to, you can even write it down afterwards. Writing it down can help solidify the language, help you remember the phrases and structures you used. And here's another idea. If you're feeling brave, share your story in the comments below this video. Tell us about your favorite travel experience in English. It doesn't have to be long, maybe just a few sentences or a short paragraph. This is a safe, supportive community of English learners, and we'd all love to hear your stories. Plus, writing in the comments is great practice. It gives you a chance to use the language, to get feedback, to see how other learners are describing their experiences. And who knows, you might inspire someone else with your story. You might make someone want to visit the place you're describing. You might help someone feel less alone in their language learning journey. So let me just wrap things up here. We talked about how to describe your favorite travel experience in English, starting with a strong hook that grabs attention. We discussed using descriptive vocabulary and sensory details to paint a vivid picture, We covered the past tenses you'll need and how to use them naturally. We talked about expressing emotions authentically and keeping your story engaging throughout. We also discussed the importance of including details about people and food, remembering that any experience can be interesting if you tell it well, and ending your story with a meaningful reflection. Most importantly, we talked about how telling travel stories is not just about practicing English. It's about connecting with others, sharing a part of yourself, and celebrating the experiences that have shaped you. You know, as I was preparing for this episode, I was thinking about all the travel stories I've heard from my students over the years. Stories about visiting family in other countries, about backpacking adventures, about honeymoons and business trips and study abroad experiences. And every single story was unique and interesting in its own way, because every person's experience is unique. Every person's perspective is valuable. And that's what I want you to remember. Your travel stories matter. Your experiences are worth sharing, and you have the English skills to share them. Maybe you don't feel confident yet. Maybe you're still working on your vocabulary and grammar, but you have everything you need to start. And the more you practice, the better you'll get. I also want to remind you that learning to describe travel experiences is about more than just this one topic. The skills you develop, the vocabulary you learn, the confidence you build, all of this will help you in so many other conversations. You're learning how to tell stories, how to express emotions, how to describe experiences, and these are skills you'll use all the time in English. So keep practicing, keep pushing yourself to speak, keep sharing your stories. And remember, mistakes are part of learning. Every time you speak, even if you make errors, you're improving. You're training your brain to think in English, to find the words, to express yourself. And I'm so proud of you for being here, for listening to this podcast, for investing time in your English learning. It takes dedication and courage to learn a language, and you're doing it. You're making progress every single day, even when it doesn't feel like it. So here's what I want you to do. I'd love to hear from you. What's your favorite travel experience? Where did you go? What did you see and feel? What made it special? Leave a comment below and practice describing your experience in English. Don't worry about making mistakes. Just share your story with us. I'll be reading the comments, and I'd love to hear about your adventures. And please, if you enjoyed this podcast, like and subscribe to English Club for more English learning podcasts. Your support really helps us create more content for you. More lessons, more stories, more opportunities for you to improve your English. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Thank you for letting me share my Iceland story with you, and for listening to all these tips and ideas about describing travel experiences. I really hope this was helpful, and I hope it gave you the confidence and the tools to share your own stories. Remember, you're not just learning English, you're learning how to connect with people, how to share your life, how to be understood and to understand others. And that's beautiful. That's powerful. That's something to be proud of. So keep going, keep practicing, keep challenging yourself, and most importantly, keep enjoying the journey. Learning English is an adventure, just like travel is an adventure. There will be ups and downs, easy days and hard days, moments of frustration and moments of breakthrough, but it's all worth it. See you in the next episode. Keep practicing your English, and remember, you're doing great. You really are. Be proud of yourself, be patient with yourself, and keep moving forward. You've got this.